Chapter 732. Yu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised. The purple fire is inside the Heaven and Earth Universe formation? It should be. I'm almost certain. Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded. Yu Qianqiu was extremely excited. Just think about it. The Samadhi True Flame was a taboo even for immortal emperors and underworld kings. Once he obtained it, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the mortal world, let alone other places. Just thinking about it made him excited. His eyes lit up. He rubbed his hands and asked, "Old monster, where do you think the purple fire is in the formation?" "I don't know." Immortal Lord Crocodile answered readily. Yu Qianqiu's smile froze. The East Holy Land is so big. If you don't have a rough location, how am I supposed to find it? I really don't know. How do you want me to answer? Moreover, I only promised to tell you about the purple fire. I didn't say that I would definitely find it. I've already fulfilled my promise. Immortal Lord Crocodile said calmly. Now it's time for you to fulfill your promise. Take me out of this damned place sealed by the Heaven and Earth Universe formation. Yu Qianqiu was furious. He felt like he had been tricked. He waved his sleeves and said, "I did promise to take you out, but I didn't say when. We'll talk about it when I'm free." It was impolite not to reciprocate. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a majestic aura burst forth from Immortal Lord Crocodile's body. The surrounding water instantly formed a transparent shield, wrapping around Yu Qianqiu. Like shackles, the huge pressure shocked Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, "Old monster, what's the meaning of this? I've already warned you not to lie to me. Otherwise, I'd rather suffer the backlash of the Alliance blood than let you go." Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly increased the pressure on Yu Qianqiu. The transparent shield continued to apply pressure. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. He slowly moved his palm toward the water shield and pressed it. He suddenly shouted, "Break!" The water shield, which was as hard as steel, shook and silently collapsed. It merged with the surrounding lake water. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes widened as he sized up Yu Qianqiu curiously. Given his cultivation level, it should have been impossible for him to break through the pressure exerted by his water-dispelling spell. But he had done so easily. What surprised him the most was that he didn't feel the slightest resistance of power or cultivation, and the water barrier just silently shattered. Yu Qianqiu stared at him and said coldly, "I advise you not to threaten me with force. As long as I don't want to die, no matter how high your cultivation is, you can't do anything to me." "Oh." Immortal Lord Crocodile's silvery white robes fluttered in the wind as he said indifferently, "Then I shall give it a try. There's no need to try. If I say you can't, then you can't." Yu Qianqiu casually waved his hand and said, "Besides, I don't want to suffer the backlash of the Alliance blood. There's no need for me to die with you. I can send you out now. But I have to warn you first. After leaving the Holy East lands, you'd better not cause trouble in the human world. Otherwise, I will make you regret escaping this place at all costs." Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled faintly. He didn't think that Yu Qianqiu could do anything to him. Instead, he took Yu Qianqiu's threat as words of pride. He nodded and said, "Don't worry. I have no interest in the human world. After leaving this Holy East lands, I will cancel the blood alliance with you and immediately return to the celestial world. From then on, we will have nothing to do with each other. As for the matter of you obtaining the divine sword, I will not reveal it to anyone. Just pretend that we've never met." Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He didn't think that the blood alliance could be cancelled. But this was good too. With his current strength, it was indeed wishful thinking to control the other party. His previous plan was a little too wishful thinking. He nodded and said, "All right, we'll talk about getting out of here when we get ashore. There are some things that you need to pay attention to. Don't ruin my plans." He immediately told him some things. After listening to him, Immortal Lord Crocodile pondered for a while and agreed. The sun shone brightly on the Moon Lake, and it regained its calm. Garland and the others, who were waiting by the shore, no longer held any hope for Yu Qianqiu's survival. Hence, the shore became busy again. The hundreds of crocodile corpses were enough to keep them busy for a while. But to them, it was also a rich source of food. If they stored it, it would be enough to last them for a long time. A few people stayed behind to guard the lake, while the others gathered in groups of 3 to 5 to pull out the spears and dismember the crocodiles. It was not safe to stay near the lake, and no one knew if the monster would appear again. From today onwards, no one among the cannibals would dare to bathe in the Moon Lake anymore. At this moment, the people on the shore suddenly shouted excitedly, He's still alive!" Everyone looked over and saw a head emerge from the lake. It was gradually rising from the lake and wading slowly to the shore. If it was not Yu Qianqiu, who else could it be? Garland, who was talking to a few children, turned her head and her beautiful eyes lit up. She didn't care about anything else and dashed towards the lake. She rushed into the water and jumped onto Yu Qianqiu's wet body. Her 2 beautiful legs wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's waist. Yu Qianqiu supported her subconsciously and hugged her plump buttocks. He was really speechless. "I'm very traditional." Oh. The people by the lake were instantly excited. They raised their arms and cheered. The children even jumped up and down. This was the warmest welcome for the warrior's return. No one expected that Yu Qianqiu, who had been in the lake for a night, could still come back alive. Suddenly the cheers stopped. Everyone's eyes were fixed on something not far behind Yu Qianqiu. They saw another person rising from the lake. His long silver hair was wet and stuck to his cheeks. His silver-white robe was wet and stuck to his burly body. His face was fierce and cold. Garland, who was hugging Yu Qianqiu's head and pressing it against her full breasts, was stunned. Yu Qianqiu struggled to free his head from her full breasts and almost suffocated. He turned to look at a mortal crocodile behind him and said, "Thanks to his help, we killed the monster in the lake. From now on, this peaceful lake will belong to you cannibals forever." After saying that, he pulled Garland away from him and put her down. The people on the shore looked at each other and suddenly burst into cheers. They danced happily on the spot. No one wanted to leave this mother lake that had raised them for countless generations. They were used to having sex by the lake and giving birth to their next generation. They really didn't want to leave this place. Bully waved his arm, and the cannibals rushed to the lake, splashing water everywhere. Yu Qianqiu was lifted and thrown into the sky by a group of people. They caught him when he landed and threw him up again to show their respect for the brave warrior who protected their home. Some people surrounded a mortal crocodile. A few strong young men stretched out their arms and grabbed a mortal crocodile's thighs, trying to lift him up. Unexpectedly, he was as solid as a rock. He stood upright in the water and couldn't be lifted at all. Just as they were surprised, they heard Snow Lord Crocodile yell, "Get out of my way!" His gaze fell on the group of crocodile corpses on the shore, and a faint murderous aura emanated from him, scaring the group of people. Everyone's eyes were on him. They didn't know why this brave warrior was so heartless. Yu Qianqiu, who was being held by the crowd, frowned and said, "Old Snow Lord, they don't mean any harm." In fact, he was secretly reminding him not to forget what he had told them below. The word Snow Lord sounded like a woman, and a mortal crocodile's facial muscles twitched. He glanced at the crowd, then stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "I'm not used to having too many people. You should finish what you promised me first." He had promised Yu Qianqiu that he wouldn't attack the cannibals in the lake, and he would accompany Yu Qianqiu to put on a show. However, the crocodile corpses on the shore were too conspicuous. If he stayed any longer, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. Yu Qianqiu followed his gaze, and when he saw the crocodile corpses on the shore, he suddenly understood everything. He struggled to get the people who were carrying him to put him down. He walked up to Garland and smiled. "He helped me kill the monster in the lake, and I promised to help him a little. I'm afraid I have to leave for a while. I'll be back again." After saying that, he waved at a mortal crocodile and walked towards the shore. A mortal crocodile pushed through the crowd and followed. Because of his murderous look, the crowd fell silent. The cannibals didn't say anything, and they silently watched the two figures disappear into the depths of the forest on the side of the mountain. In the dense forest, the sunlight shone through the branches and leaves, dazzling the eyes. The two of them walked, one in front of the other. A mortal crocodile, who was walking behind, stretched out his arms, his broad palms constantly touching the branches and leaves that brushed past him. He carefully took each step, listening to the rustling sound of the thick leaves under his feet. His expression was a little dazed, as if he was in a dream. He suddenly stopped and asked, "Yu Qianqiu, have I really escaped? Am I dreaming?" Returning to the human world, and seeing the lush greenery and beautiful sunlight once again, he found that it was a little surreal. Yu Qianqiu, who was walking in front, stopped and turned to look at Immortal Crocodile. He shook his head slightly, and revealed a pitiful expression. "You have indeed escaped from the lake, and it was I who saved you, you ungrateful fellow. I understand how you feel, but it has nothing to do with me now, and I won't comfort you. I just want to ask you, after you leave the Holy East lands, do you really have the confidence to leave the human world and return to the celestial world?" Immortal Crocodile recovered from his daze and said in a low voice, "This is not something you should worry about. I naturally have a way to return to the celestial world. You just need to bring me out of the heaven and earth universe formation." Oh, a mocking smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. He looked around, and after confirming that there was no one else, he nodded slightly. "All right, then let's do it here." After that, he took out a few small silver balls from his storage pouch. He muttered an incantation and shot out a silver light from his hand, scattering the silver balls in all directions. Then, he made a messy hand seal that even he didn't know what it was. Immortal Crocodile was confused. He tilted his head to listen, trying to hear what he was muttering, but it was like a secret language. Even with his experience, he couldn't understand a single word. When Yu Qianqiu stopped, he finally couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said mockingly, "You've lived for so many years, yet you can't even tell that I'm setting up a formation?" "Setting up a formation? What formation?" Immortal Crocodile was taken aback. He looked suspiciously at the few silver balls hidden in the thick grass. If they were setting up an array, why didn't he sense any energy fluctuations? Was there such an array formation technique in the world? Chapter 733. You haven't seen it before, right? Yu Qianqiu winked and said, "Don't underestimate it. Let me tell you, this is a teleportation array I created myself. Don't you want to get out of the Holy East lands? This array can teleport you to the outside of the Holy East lands. That's how I came in." In his previous life, he seemed to have seen this saying in some random novel, so he casually used it to fool this old monster. Teleportation array? Immortal Lord Crocodile's mind was in a daze. He racked his brains to think. Unfortunately, he did not remember the legend of this array. He looked suspiciously at the smug Yu Qianqiu. To be honest, he still somewhat believed it. This was because when Yu Qianqiu broke his water control technique in the lake, his method was very strange. He did not feel any movement at all, and the water control technique was quietly broken. Now, he did not feel any energy fluctuations when he set up the array. In short, although Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was not high, he felt that it was a little strange. Coupled with the strange thing about the divine sword recognizing its master, Yu Qianqiu seemed a little mysterious in his eyes. "Come, stand beside me. Let's get ready to go." Yu Qianqiu pointed to his side, which made Immortal Lord Crocodile a little nervous. He had never played with this thing before, so he did not know whether it was dangerous or not. He weakly stood beside Yu Qianqiu, carefully looked around and asked, "Is this okay?" Yu Qianqiu stared at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Don't blame me for not reminding you. Close your eyes first, hold your breath, and don't move. Otherwise, don't blame me if you encounter any danger during the teleportation." "Close my eyes." Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately became vigilant. "You won't do anything to harm me, will you?" Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. "Measuring the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a vile person, do you think that everyone is as ungrateful as you? Have you forgotten that we formed a blood alliance? What's the difference between harming you and harming myself?" After hearing what he said, Immortal Lord Crocodile thought about it and agreed. If Yu Qianqiu harmed him, he would definitely suffer the backlash of the alliance blood. He probably would not do anything out of line. So he nodded with ease and said, "Then let's start." After that, he consciously closed his eyes. Yu Qianqiu raised half of his brows and said in an enigmatic tone, "Old monster, I'll say it again. If you open your eyes halfway and something happens to you, It won't be my fault. If something happens to you, don't blame me." As he said that, he released his divine sense and enveloped the old man. Immortal Crocodile naturally felt that he had been enveloped by his divine sense. His eyes moved, and he wanted to open them, but he forced himself not to. He nodded and said, "I'll listen to your arrangements." He paused, keenly sensing that the surroundings had changed. Yu Qianqiu had also withdrawn his divine sense. What puzzled him the most was that he could still hear the sound of waves crashing against the shore. A gust of wind blew over, carrying the fishy and salty smell of the sea. Immortal Lord Crocodile was shocked. Could there really be such a magical array in this world? He really wanted to open his eyes and take a look, but he was afraid that something might happen. The sea breeze continued to blow, suddenly becoming stronger and blowing away the fog in front of him. On the mountain peak, Yu Qianqiu silently looked at the vast continent in front of him that was covered in fog. He said quietly, "Old monster, I've fulfilled my promise. You can open your eyes now." Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes suddenly opened, and he quickly looked around. His gaze swept across the endless deep blue sea, the island he was standing on, and the vast continent covered in fog. His pupils shrank, and he said in a daze, This is the island opposite the East Holy Land. I've seen it before." The shock in his heart was indescribable. He had really escaped from the continent that was sealed by the East Holy Land. How was this possible? He turned his head with difficulty and looked at the calm Yu Qianqiu beside him. He realized that the young man in front of him was so unfathomable. It was as if he had divine means. So many top experts from both the Netherworld and Immortal World could not do it. But he had done it, and so easily. Yu Qianqiu did not move and said calmly, "That's right. This is the island opposite the East Holy Land. It's now called Xianxian Island." He put his hands behind his back and imitated Bai Changchun's words and actions. He did have the demeanor of an expert. At this moment, an angry shout suddenly came from the island. "Who dares to trespass on my Xianxian Island?" A figure shot over quickly. Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at him and waved his hand disdainfully. A huge silver palm shadow with the aura of rolling thunder appeared out of nowhere. It swatted the figure back like a fly. Yu Qianqiu happened to turn around and was immediately dumbfounded. He recognized the person who had barged in angrily. It was Patriarch Nan Ming. That palm strike was probably going to be tough for him. He quickly stopped Immortal Lord Crocodile and said, "Don't attack. He's one of us." Immortal Lord Crocodile's raised palm paused for a moment before he put it down again. Patriarch Nan Ming, who had been smashed into the ground by the palm strike, immediately coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood and crawled out. He looked battered and exhausted. He pulled out a golden net from his storage bag to defend himself. He looked at the mountain peak in shock. The power of that palm strike was too strong. He was enveloped by that aura, and he did not even have a chance to escape. He could not imagine who in the cultivation world could have such a high cultivation. Senior Nan Ming. It's all a misunderstanding. Patriarch Nan Ming was stunned. There were two people on the mountain peak, and one of them was Yu Qianqiu. He was waving his hand and apologizing to him. His figure flashed, and he resisted the discomfort in his body as he flew toward the mountain peak again. He ignored Yu Qianqiu, who was laughing apologetically, and locked his gaze on the silver-haired and silver-clothed burly man. The other party was even taller and stronger than him, and he looked at him as if he was looking at an ant. His eyes were filled with disdain. His temperament, especially, was rarely seen in the world. Patriarch Nan Ming was shocked. Putting aside the fact that he could not see through the other party's cultivation, the power of that strike was even more terrifying. Based on his experience, he had never seen such a person in the cultivation world. Suddenly he coughed twice, and he could not help but spit out a lump of extravasated blood in his chest. Senior Nan Ming, are you all right? Yu Qianqiu hurried over to support him. Patriarch Nan Ming was already quite injured, but he still wanted to save face and shook his head. It's just a small injury, it's nothing. He stared at Immortal Lord Crocodile and asked, Your cultivation is very high. May I know which expert has come to visit my Xianxian Island? It was clearly a compliment, but a hint of bitterness flashed across Immortal Lord Crocodile's face. Was his current cultivation still considered high? It had already fallen from mid-stage immortal emperor to late-stage exalted immortal. Who knew how many years it would take for him to recover his previous cultivation? He closed his eyes slightly and said, "Your Xianxian Island? When I came here, this island did not have a master yet." As he spoke, he lifted his hand slightly, and his silk-like sleeve shook open to reveal a golden bracelet. A white light flashed from it. A small porcelain bottle appeared in Immortal Lord Crocodile's hand. He threw it to Patriarch Nan Ming and said, "I did not know that you were acquainted with Yu Qianqiu just now. Your injuries are not light. Take this to heal. One is enough." He was obviously giving face to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. He stared at the golden bracelet on Immortal Lord Crocodile's wrist. His eyes shone brightly, but he was pulled back to reality by Patriarch Nan Ming, who was holding the porcelain bottle. Seeing Patriarch Nan Ming's questioning look, he immediately smiled awkwardly and explained, "This is my friend. His name is Yi Shuejun. The two of us traveled around the world and happened to come to this place to rest. We did not expect to have a misunderstanding with you. Please do not take it to heart. It is purely a misunderstanding." Yi Shuejun? Patriarch Nan Ming was stunned. He had never heard of such a person in the cultivation world. He tilted his head to look at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of suspicion. He had long heard from Nongzhu that this fellow had remarkable abilities. It seemed that Nongzhu was not lying. He did not know when this fellow had made such a powerful friend. It seemed that he had suffered today's injuries for nothing. But then again, even if he was not Yu Qianqiu's friend, he would not be able to seek justice. The other party was too powerful. That. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and said, "Senior, you should go back and heal for the time being. We have some private things to discuss when we borrow your precious land." He was tactfully persuading him to retreat. Patriarch Nan Ming was not an ignorant person. With a face full of doubts and a stomach full of anger, he turned around and rushed down the mountain. Yi Shuejun stared blankly at the misty East Holy Land, giving people a strange feeling of loss. Patriarch Nan Ming's compliments made him think of many things in an instant. The excitement he felt after escaping from the lake and the East Holy Land was gone in an instant. He was thinking, with his current cultivation, even if he returned to the immortal world, could he really restore his former glory as one of the 12 great immortal monarchs? With the cultivation of a mere exalted immortal, he might not even be qualified to stand firm in the immortal world. He knew Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's character very well. He would never take care of a useless person. Perhaps he really had to start from scratch. Only he, who had experienced it, could understand the hardships. Yu Qianqiu stared at him silently for a while. His eyes turned, and he smiled faintly. "Old monster, aren't you going back to the immortal world? How are you going to go back?" "Yes, I'm going back." His voice was very soft, as if he was talking to himself. It was full of desolation. "Haha, I haven't seen the scene of ascending to the immortal world. Why don't you take me with you?" Yu Qianqiu asked with a sincere smile. Immortal Crocodile looked back at him blankly and nodded, feeling like his soul had left his body. He said, "Okay." He directly grabbed his arm, turned into a stream of light, and shot into the sky. The protective formation of Xianxian Island was useless. It was easily pierced through like a paper window. This scene caused Patriarch Nan Ming, who was sitting cross-legged at the foot of the mountain, to feel a toothache. He lowered his head and pulled out the stopper of the porcelain bottle in his hand. A strange fragrance assailed his nostrils. Just a whiff of it made him feel refreshed. He poured it into his palm. There were only 6 pills the size of a thumb. They had a faint white glow, and the surroundings were immediately filled with a strange fragrance. Patriarch Nan Ming's eyes lit up. With his experience, he naturally knew that these pills were not ordinary. He put 5 pills back and held one in his hand, hesitating. Then, he thought about it, and felt that Yu Qianqiu would not harm him, so he directly put one into his mouth. A sweet fragrance assaulted his nostrils. When the pill reached his mouth, it immediately turned into sweet saliva and slid down his throat. After flowing into his stomach, a cool and warm feeling rose in his abdomen. They intertwined and mixed together, spreading into his meridians and seeping into his limbs and bones. Patriarch Nan Ming, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. He looked at his body and felt that all the pores on his body had opened up. His pores were actually emitting a faint spiritual energy and fragrance, and a thin mist was lingering around his body. His entire body felt comfortable from head to toe, and it was so comfortable that he almost wanted to let out a moan. He could not help but exclaim in surprise, "Good stuff." He looked at the porcelain bottle in his hand and remembered that there were still 5 pills inside. He quickly put it into his storage bag like it was a treasure. He immediately closed his eyes and locked all the pores on his body to seal the medicinal effect. He calmed his heart and regulated his breathing. Several hours later, when he slowly opened his eyes again, he was pleasantly surprised to find that not only had his serious internal injuries healed, but even his cultivation, which had always been difficult to improve, showed signs of breaking through to the peak of the middle stage of soul formation. He stood up and let out a long cry of joy against the raging waves of the sea. His whole body felt so comfortable. This feeling was so good. Standing on a rock by the sea, Patriarch Nan Ming looked at the sea and sighed. The cultivation of the silver-robed man was so terrifying that it was engraved in his heart. From the looks of it, he seemed to have a special relationship with Yu Qianqiu. Otherwise, he would not have given him such a good bottle of panacea just because of Yu Qianqiu. A panacea that could help a soul formation cultivator improve his cultivation and heal serious injuries was definitely not an ordinary thing with such a miraculous effect. Ishuejuan? This Yu Qianqiu is really not simple. He actually has a friend with such an unfathomable cultivation. Patriarch Nan Ming muttered to himself and shook his head. He could not help but laugh when he thought of Nongzhu's worries. Nongzhu was worried that after Bai Changchun left, Yu Qianqiu would be bullied. He had such a good friend who could bully him. She wondered how Patriarch Nan Ming would react if he knew that he had not taken a panacea, but an immortal pill given by one of the 12 great immortal monarchs in the immortal world. But then again, it was a blessing in disguise. High above the white clouds, 2 people were flying together quickly. Yu Qianqiu, who was being dragged by immortal Lord Crocodile, was already used to such high-speed flying. He was surprised at first. Immortals were indeed immortals. They could fly so fast. However, he could imagine that if immortal Lord Crocodile had not been carrying him, and if his cultivation had not fallen so much, his flying speed would have been unbelievably fast. Looking at the direction they were heading and the terrain below, Yu Qianqiu had vaguely guessed where immortal Lord Crocodile was going, and they were almost there. As he thought about it, he could already see the colorful fog in the distant sky. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them landed on the desolate Gobi Desert. Opposite them was the majestic colorful fog. Yu Qianqiu seemed to be moving his hands and feet casually, but his eyes were observing the expressions of the people around him. Immortal Lord Crocodile was completely stunned. He looked at the place in front of him that was sealed by the colorful fog in disbelief. After a long time, he cried out, "Soul transformation smoke." It's actually the soul transformation smoke. This place is actually sealed by the soul transformation smoke. Oh my God! Who can tell me what's going on? Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed slightly and retracted his hand into his sleeve. The eagle fell to the ground and turned into a puddle of pitch-black water. Other than the immortal ascension stage, there are other ways to get to the immortal world, through the underworld and the demon world. Forget about the demon world, it's basically impossible to enter. And the underworld's emperor of the underworld has never been on good terms with the immortal emperor. If I barge in without the underworld's permission, only death awaits me. With my current cultivation level, don't even think about it. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head helplessly. Unless my cultivation level is so high that I can shatter the void and open a new path. But then again, if my cultivation reaches that level, no one will be able to stop me if I want to pass through the netherworld. Then what should we do? Yu Qianqiu said with a look of pity. If that's the case, doesn't that mean you can't go back? We'll see. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed and turned to face him. You don't owe me anything anymore. I'll teach you how to break the blood oath. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. Seeing his disheartened look, Yu Qianqiu laughed and patted his shoulder. Old monster, don't be discouraged. There must be a way. Maybe we just don't know about it yet. Since the blood oath hasn't been broken, do me a favor first. After dawdling for so long, he finally got to the point. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes turned cold. He stared at the hand patting his shoulder and said indifferently, "If you have something to say it." Obviously, he was not impressed by Yu Qianqiu's actions. Yu Qianqiu sheepishly withdrew his affectionate hand and said with a chuckle, "You also know that I want to find the purple flame. Why don't you accompany me to the Eastern Holy Land? You can go by yourself. Why drag me along? Moreover, I don't know where the purple flames are." Immortal Lord Crocodile said expressionlessly. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. "Have you forgotten? You're not the only one sealed in the Heaven and Earth Qingquan formation. There are many old friends of yours inside. It's too dangerous for me to barge in there with my cultivation level." "You mean you want me to protect you?" Immortal Lord Crocodile snorted. "You've got the wrong idea. Even if I want to help you, I'm afraid I won't be able to. If my old friends are still in the East Holy Land, I won't be able to protect you with my current cultivation level." "How is that possible?" Yu Qianqiu was shocked. "Aren't you old friends? If there's any trouble, you can just tell them. After all, you used to be one of the 12 great immortal lords, second only to the immortal emperor. Don't tell me they won't give you face." Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed coldly. After a while he asked, "What do you think I relied on to rise up in the celestial world? I climbed up step by stepping on the corpses and shoulders of others. I've offended countless people. If they find out that my cultivation level has fallen to such a level, think about the consequences." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. As expected, where there were people, there would be grudges. The celestial world was no exception. After a moment's hesitation, he suddenly looked up at Immortal Lord Crocodile and said in a low voice, "Are you afraid of them? If I were you, I would definitely take back the glory that once belonged to me, not hide. If you don't even dare to face the East Holy Land, why do you want to return to the celestial world? If you ask me, the East Holy Land is the place where you can start anew." Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flashed as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. An uncontrollable aura circulated around him. After a long while, he retracted his aura and narrowed his eyes. "Although I know you're trying to provoke me, but I agree." Yu Qianqiu was delighted. He didn't care if Immortal Lord Crocodile saw through his provocation. As long as he agreed, it was fine. He took out a few silver balls and prepared to set up a formation. Unexpectedly, Immortal Lord Crocodile shouted, "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He raised his head and frowned. "Are you going back on your word again?" Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. "You don't look like someone who knows his place. Before we go, let's dissolve the blood oath first. Otherwise, if you keep causing trouble, won't I be dragged down to death by you?" Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth but was speechless. It was really difficult to control this old monster. However, he couldn't force him, so he could only nod and agree. Then, Immortal Lord Crocodile began to teach him how to dissolve the blood oath. After spending some time to learn it, the two of them cut the blood talismans drawn on their palms at the same time. They put their left palms together, enchanted to use their magic power. A bloody light flashed across their bodies and flowed from their left arms to their palms. After the two bloody lights met on their left palms, they suddenly exploded with red light and disappeared. The two of them withdrew their left hands at the same time. There was a pool of blood in their palms. Yu Qianqiu shook off the blood on his palms and said angrily, "Are you satisfied now?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's face was cold, as if nothing had happened. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He flicked out a few small silver balls and pretended to set up the array. After he was done, he pointed to his side and gestured for Immortal Lord Crocodile to stand up and prepare to leave. Unexpectedly, Immortal Lord Crocodile looked puzzled. He stared at the few small silver balls on the ground and said suspiciously, "I remember that you used 6 silver balls to set up the array. Now you only use 5. Are you sure this is okay? Could it be that you made a mistake?" Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. Chapter 735. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw Immortal Lord Crocodile, His eyes immediately became spirited and full of fighting spirit. When his gaze landed on Yu Qianqiu, he was startled. After sizing them up, he retracted his fighting spirit and slowly closed his eyes. He could probably tell that the two of them were in cahoots. Yu Qianqiu was extremely shocked. Although he knew that there were experts from both the Netherworld and the immortal world in the Eastern Holy Land, Bai Changchun was simply an invincible legend in his heart. He was already used to his status as the world's #1 expert. He never imagined that he would be injured, and from the looks of it, his injuries were not clear. His symbolic green robe had been torn in many places, especially between his chest and abdomen. There was a large hole in it, and blood could be seen. A palm-sized wound could be seen. It was unknown what caused the wound. The bottom of the green robe was stained with blood, and it had already dried to a dark red color. Although his thin face was still full of arrogance, it looked somewhat pale. Yu Qianqiu was agitated. He quickly turned around and set up a soundproof barrier in the tent. Then, he squatted down gently and half-knelt beside Bai Changchun. He gritted his teeth and said, "Master, who injured you?" Bai Changchun did not say a word and did not reply. He quietly regulated his breathing and healed his injuries. Immortal Lord Crocodile was a little surprised. "Yu Qianqiu, he is your master?" Seeing that Yu Qianqiu nodded and admitted it, he could not help but carefully size up Bai Changchun. In the end, he was shocked to find that he could not see through Bai Changchun's cultivation. His current cultivation was at the late stage Exalted Immortal. Based on this, wouldn't the injured person's cultivation be higher than his? But the strange thing was that he could tell at a glance that the injured person's physical body was not an immortal body, but a human body. How could a human body withstand such a high cultivation? This was too unbelievable. His eyes flickered and fell on Yu Qianqiu. He was slightly stunned, and immediately thought that he understood. He also couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, but this kid was only at the crossing calamity stage. Yu Qianqiu and the injured person were master and disciple. In that case, the master and disciple belonged to the same sect. They must have practiced some strange magic art, which was why people couldn't see through them. Otherwise, the mortal body would not be able to withstand such a powerful cultivation. Seeing that his master did not reply, Yu Qianqiu said anxiously, "Master, I think I should bring you back first. This damned place isn't suitable for healing. Instead, it will consume true essence." After waiting for a while, his master still did not speak. He handed it over and said, "This is the Yin Yang Rejuvenation Pill. It has good healing effects. For human cultivators, as long as they're still breathing, they can recover from their injuries. One pill is enough." "Thank you, old monster." Yu Qianqiu took the bottle and was about to open the cork when Bai Changchun raised his hand and pressed it down. Bai Changchun shook his head and said, "There's no need. This time, I was at a disadvantage because my body couldn't bear my cultivation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been injured. Although I'm injured, it's not a bad thing for me. I've already faintly comprehended a trace of the great Tao of reforging the body. There's no need to rush to heal. Leave the wound for me to study." Reforging the body. Even Immortal Crocodile couldn't help but exclaim. He looked at Bai Changchun, as if he was looking at a monster. Perhaps Bai Changchun and Yu Qianqiu didn't know what this meant, but Immortal Crocodile was shocked. The word rebirth popped up in his mind. Yu Qianqiu looked at the wound on Bai Changchun's abdomen and didn't know what to say. However, he also knew that no matter what he said, it would be useless. Since Bai Changchun didn't even use the elixir, he should just continue to comprehend it. He didn't return the porcelain bottle to Immortal Crocodile. Instead, he put it away and asked curiously, "Master, who exactly did you fight with? How could someone injure you like this?" Bai Changchun didn't hide anything and simply said, "I heard that the great feudal lords from all over the world have late-stage great immortal cultivation, so I directly went to challenge the nearest one. Who knew that there would be a group of guests from the immortal city in that great feudal lord's mansion? After fighting, I was besieged. I killed some of them and injured others. I was also injured by 3 late-stage great immortal cultivators, but in the end I managed to kill them, because I wanted to find a place to heal. But I wasn't familiar with other places. So I instinctively wanted to return to the place where I first came. In the end, due to my heavy injuries, I landed here. That's roughly what happened. His words were really very simple, but Yu Qianzhou's heart palpitated when he heard it. And he cursed in his heart. The old man was too crazy. He heard that the great feudal lord had late-stage great immortal cultivation, and he went to challenge him. How high is your cultivation? Can't you tell me a little? He actually skipped the feudal lord and went to challenge the great feudal lord. He was really crazy. What did he mean by a group of guests from the immortal city? How many people were there in this group? The so-called siege, how many people were besieged by? The so-called killing and injuring some, how many people were there? How high was their cultivation? The old man did not speak of any of them. He only mentioned them briefly, but Yu Qianzhou could imagine how intense the fight must have been. At least, it must have been an intensity that he had never seen before. It was just that the old man didn't want to talk about it. The only thing that he could describe was the combined strength of the three late-stage great immortals. It was obvious that the three of them were not ordinary powerful, but they were still killed by him. Based on Yu Qianzhou's understanding of Bai Changchun's character, he was very sure that the battle was more intense than he had imagined. Bai Changchun had not been forced into a corner. Otherwise, with his arrogant character, how could he instinctively avoid healing his injuries? Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Bai Changchun solemnly. He didn't know whether this person was telling the truth or not. If he could kill three late-stage great immortals who had joined forces to attack him, then his cultivation had already reached the early-stage immortal emperor? As far as Immortal Lord Crocodile knew, among the people from the immortal and netherworld realms, who came to fight the Thousand Swords Demon Lord, there was no one with the cultivation of a minor immortal. The others with the lowest cultivation were at the early stage exalted immortal. Most of them were great immortals and above, and he couldn't see through his cultivation now. So this person's cultivation had at least reached the great immortal realm. But what puzzled Immortal Lord Crocodile was how the human body could withstand such a high cultivation. How exactly did he do it? Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, "Master, may I ask, what realm has your cultivation reached?" Bai Changchun paused and thought for a while. "I have already integrated the heavenly spirit into my life soul." "What do you mean?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. When he didn't get a reply from Bai Changchun, he turned back to Immortal Lord Crocodile and said, "Old monster, what is the cultivation of integrating the heavenly spirit into your life soul?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flickered. Integrating the heavenly spirit into your life soul represents the early stage great immortal cultivation. He stared at Bai Changchun and said, "Your cultivation is not bad, but I find it hard to believe that you could kill three late-stage great immortals with your early-stage great immortal cultivation, not to mention that there were others surrounding you." The meaning behind his words was obvious. He clearly did not believe what Bai Changchun had said, but Yu Qianzhou believed him without hesitation, because he knew Bai Changchun's character. This was a person who was so proud that he wouldn't lie. He said in shock, "Master, so your cultivation has already reached the early stage great immortal. No wonder you could kill that underworld messenger so easily." Bai Changchun ignored him and looked up at Immortal Lord Crocodile. He said coldly, "Whether you believe it or not, what does it have to do with me?" The atmosphere in the tent suddenly became tense. Chapter 736. Although there was no hostility in Immortal Crocodile's words, his tone was so rude and disdainful that it made Immortal Crocodile's eyes glow fiercely. He stared at Bai Changchun with a murderous look. On the other hand, Bai Changchun was still calm and collected, not taking Immortal Crocodile seriously at all. "We're all on the same side, don't hurt our friendship." Yu Qianzhou smiled apologetically as he tried to persuade Immortal Crocodile. Although Immortal Crocodile's cultivation had dropped, he still had his pride and skills. How could he stand someone looking down on him like that? But when he glanced at the wound on Bai Changchun's chest and abdomen, his murderous intent began to recede. He slowly said in a low voice, "Your injury has not healed yet. When it is healed, I will come and ask for advice from you." With that, he turned and walked out of the tent. Only the master and disciple were left in the tent. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and sat next to Bai Changchun with a bitter smile. He scratched his head and said, "Master, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it." Bai Changchun's deep gaze stared straight into his eyes, causing Yu Qianqiu to not dare to look directly at him. However, Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and braced himself to say, "Master, although your cultivation level is high, as a person in this world, how can you rather break than bend? Even if it is for your own good, there is a time. Sigh. Master, this is really not very good." As a disciple, he could not say too much and could only stop. Yu Qianqiu thought that Bai Changchun would be unhappy to hear this. Unexpectedly, Bai Changchun looked at him and smiled. He nodded and said, "Yu Qianqiu, what are you pursuing in this life?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the smile on Bai Changchun's face and was stunned. It was rare to see his master smile. After hearing this, he thought for a while and said, "I am actually a lazy person. In fact, I really want to live a carefree life like Senior Nongzhu. However, your disciple's mortal heart is too heavy, and there are many things that are difficult to let go of. Furthermore, there is always a sense of crisis, so I have no choice but to work hard. If you must say that I have a goal, I hope that one day, I will have the ability to let myself and the people around me live a truly free and unfettered life. If my ability is a little stronger, I hope that I can let everyone in the world live a little better." Bai Changchun smiled faintly and said, "Are you tired of living?" Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and nodded. "I'm a little tired in my heart, but the path is chosen by myself. After walking so far, I don't want to turn back. I want to continue walking, hoping that my wish will come true one day. Continue to work hard." The smile on Bai Changchun's face became warmer and warmer. He sighed slightly and said, "You are an amazing person. You have a strong heart, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of responsibility. In fact, your heart is much stronger than mine, so you are destined to be very tired, but this is also why I like you." These words caused Yu Qianqiu to feel a bit embarrassed. He rubbed his nose with an embarrassed smile and said, "Master is too kind. How can this disciple compare to you? Your indomitable spirit and invincible cultivation have always made this disciple very envious. This disciple can't even beg for it. I know my own situation very well. To put it bluntly, this disciple is just a selfish, vile person. How can I compare to Master?" Bai Changchun gently waved his hand and said, "You are wrong. Who in the world is not selfish? People's hearts are made of flesh, not stones that can pave the way. They can sacrifice themselves for passers-by and have no regrets. A person with a really strong heart, no matter how selfish he is, can distinguish right from wrong, good from evil, and will unconsciously dare to take responsibility. I am not as good as you. Since I embarked on the road of cultivation, I have only done it for myself. It is also unintentional to take charge of the demon domain and bear that responsibility. Now, I have even abandoned the responsibility I should bear for myself. This is what I call being truly selfish." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Why are these two master and disciple fighting to put the label of selfishness on me? Their awareness is too high. Selfishness is selfishness. How can there be a difference between true and false? You are just feeling a little guilty because you have avoided responsibility. But it is not good to argue with him. So he simply kept his mouth shut. There was a short silence in the tent. "Yu Qianqiu, do you know what Master is pursuing in this life?" Bai Changchun suddenly asked. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He shook his head curiously and said, "I don't know." Bai Changchun's eyes suddenly became deep and bright. The strong battle intent emitted from it was like a bright lamp, illuminating the entire tent. He said in a sonorous voice, "A higher cultivation, a stronger opponent until I die." In a roundabout way, this was equivalent to answering Yu Qianqiu's previous unbending words. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He knew that it was useless to persuade him. Bai Changchun tilted his head to look at him and said, "I believe you have seen what I buried on the beach, so don't look for me in the future." Unreasonable. It was unreasonable. Yu Qianqiu secretly shook his head. He reached out and took out the storage bag that Bai Changchun buried on the beach. Then, he stuffed many small silver balls into the storage bag and offered it with both hands. "Master, disciple understands your determination. Don't worry, Disciple promises not to look for you in the future. But it is better for you to keep this with you. When you are at an important place, you can casually throw one out. For the sake of our relationship as master and disciple, take it as helping disciple. Perhaps disciple will need it when I encounter some big trouble in the future. Bai Changchun stared at the storage bag in his hand. After pondering for a while, he finally reached out and took it, which was considered a promise. Yu Qianqiu sighed softly. He stood up and bowed. Disciple will take his leave. I will not disturb master's recovery. After that, he retreated out of the tent. There was a blue sky and white clouds outside. There was a reflection in the moon lake below. He could smell the fragrance of grass when he breathed. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath, and his eyes became firm again. Garland, who was guarding outside, also came over and wrapped around him like a water snake. Her ample bosom kept rubbing against his body, as if she was teasing his sexual desire. Yu Qianqiu looked at her with clear eyes and smiled. Chief Garland, please tell the people in the tribe not to tell anyone about the immortal in the tent. Garland immediately agreed, and reluctantly left him. It seemed that she was not able to have sex with such a brave warrior, and she felt very uncomfortable in her heart. By the lake, immortal Lord Crocodile, dressed in a silver-white robe, stood quietly with his hands behind his back. His silver hair fluttered in the wind, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yu Qianqiu stepped on the grass and strolled over to stand beside him. He smiled faintly. Don't take it to heart. My master is just like that. He's used to breaking rather than bending. He doesn't mean to look down on you. Before he finished speaking, both of them looked back at the same time. They saw that Bai Changchun had already walked out of the tent. He glanced at the two of them indifferently, then turned into a shadow and flew toward a mountain peak in the distance. They could vaguely see him landing on the mountain peak. Yu Qianqiu muttered in his heart. I don't know what he's going to do again. He's injured, but he doesn't know how to behave. Why is he running around blindly? Suddenly, immortal Lord Crocodile's voice sounded in his ear. Your master gives off a feeling of being one with heaven and earth. This realm is very strong. It's not his cultivation level. I can see that he has a body full of skills, but it's bound by his physical body. Once he is reborn and has an immortal body of eternal life, he will be even stronger. If he can't get rid of the shackles of his physical body, no matter how strong he is, he will be limited by his lifespan. It's a pity that the immortal ascension platform is sealed by the soul transformation smoke. Otherwise, he could use the passage to refine his immortal body. By then, the celestial world will have another top expert. What a pity. Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. My master is known as the world's #1 expert, so he is naturally very strong. I believe that even if my master doesn't use the passage to refine his immortal body, he will be reborn and cast an immortal body. Oh, there's such a thing. Immortal Lord Crocodile tilted his head. Why are you so sure? Yu Qianqiu's eyes were firm as he said word by word. Because he has always been invincible and can defeat any strong opponent. Even if his physical body can restrain him for a while, it can't restrain him forever. He will break through the shackle sooner or later. I believe that this is his fate. Even if he dies one day, he will only die at the hands of the strongest opponent, not because of the limitations of his physical body. Immortal Lord Crocodile snorted. Master and disciple indeed. Looks like you have a lot of confidence in your master. Not a lot of confidence, but he can definitely do it. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and stared at immortal Lord Crocodile. Because his name is Bai Changchun, the human world has bound him for too long. Now that the shackles have been broken, he will move forward with indomitable will, becoming stronger and stronger until he dies in battle. One day, you will know the meaning of the name, Bai Changchun. Bang! An angry clap of thunder sounded, as if in response to Yu Qianqiu's words. The two of them suddenly looked up and saw the white clouds in the sky suddenly churning and forming dark clouds. The airflow between heaven and earth suddenly became chaotic, and in an instant, it turned into a raging gale. The calm moon lake suddenly became undulating. The cannibals by the lake looked around in fear. They had seen the weather change before, but they had never seen such a sudden change. The tents that had been set up with stakes seemed to be pulled up by the roots. The cannibals immediately got busy, pulling up the stakes and putting away the tents. The wind blew fiercely, and the sky and earth changed color. Dark clouds kept churning and gathering from all directions. In an instant, there was a loud clap of thunder that covered the sky and earth. Only the sound of thunder could be heard, and it was a frightening sight. "Old monster, what's going on?" The voice was like a mosquito buzzing under the thunder. Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky. Why did it feel like the opening of the East Holy Land? "It's where your master is. I don't know what he's doing." Thunder flashed, and Immortal Lord Crocodile pointed at the mountain where Bai Changchun had landed. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu looked carefully and saw that the dark clouds were gathering in that direction. Immortal Lord Crocodile shouted, "Let's go and see what your master is doing." Then he pulled Yu Qianqiu and flew away. The sky was dark, and none of the cannibals running around the lake noticed that the two of them had disappeared. Chapter 737. The two of them flew to the front of the mountain and looked at each other, not knowing what he was doing. Bai Changchun stood quietly at the top of the mountain with his hands behind his back and his eyes closed. Golden light constantly flowed out of his body and wandered between heaven and earth, drawing ethereal and untraceable arcs. Every flowing streak of brilliant golden light seemed ordinary, but it gave off a deep and unforgettable feeling of shock, bringing along an unknown and terrifying aura between heaven and earth. It was as if the dark clouds and storms in the sky were attracted by these flowing golden light. As the golden flowing light increased in number, the simple sketches caused the entire mountain peak to become slightly illusory and blurry. It was as if every single movement of the golden flowing light contained the laws and truths of the world. It gave people the illusion that they were reenacting the formation of this world at the beginning of time, a dreamy and magical process. The sky darkened, and the golden light shrouding the top of the mountain became more and more numerous, making Bai Changchun look like a golden Dharma idol. Suddenly, Bai Changchun opened his eyes slowly and stared at the two of them. He said calmly, "Stay away." Then he closed his eyes again. The two of them were slightly shocked. They felt a strong ancient aura coming from Bai Changchun's eyes, as if he had been standing on this mountain since ancient times. Yu Qianqiu was still in shock, but Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression became serious. He pulled Yu Qianqiu and quickly flashed hundreds of meters away. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and asked, "What are those golden lights outside my master's body?" The rumbling thunder was so loud that he couldn't even hear his own voice clearly. Thus he transmitted his voice again and asked again. Immortal Lord Crocodile said solemnly, "The quintessential essence in your body is white. When your cultivation reaches the immortal level, the quintessential essence in your body will turn into immortal qi and become golden. Your master is releasing the immortal qi in his body, as if he is communicating with the unknown power of heaven and earth. I didn't expect immortal qi to have such an effect. It's really unheard of and unseen. Amazing. Then what is my master doing? I don't know either. Let's wait and see." At this moment, the flowing golden light suddenly sped up. A series of dazzling thunderbolts shot out from the dark clouds like a series of cannons, meandering and sinisterly striking Bai Changchun's body. After the dazzling white light, it was closely followed by the continuous boom-boom sounds of explosions. Bai Changchun's entire body had been wrapped in lightning, turning into a ball of white light, like a giant incandescent light bulb, illuminating the entire world. "Master!" Yu Qianqiu exclaimed, but the lightning bolts were too loud, and his voice could be ignored. Immortal Crocodile restrained Yu Qianqiu, who was a little impulsive. He stared at the rapidly swimming golden light, then at the sinister lightning that filled the sky. He transmitted his voice and said, "Don't be agitated. Your master is fine. I think I can guess what your master is doing. I think I know what your master is doing." Yu Qianqiu felt that his eyes had been blinded by the intense white light. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "What is my master doing?" "Your master is truly a genius of his generation. Having such a master is enough to make you proud for the rest of your life." Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at the light ball at the mountain peak with a solemn expression. He paused and said, "If I'm not wrong, He is using the power of the heavenly lightning to temper his body. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. He could summon thunderclouds to borrow the power of the heavenly lightning in broad daylight. Without using any treasures, he can communicate with heaven and earth and borrow the power of heaven and earth. Amazing! Yu Qianqiu asked excitedly and nervously. Old monster, are you saying that my master is reforging his body? Can he succeed? Immortal Lord Crocodile looked back indifferently and said, Didn't you tell me before that he would definitely succeed? Why? Are you not confident now? Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and shut up. He could only blame the commotion in front of him. It would be a lie to say that he was not worried. He did not know what was going on inside the light ball that was surrounded by thunderbolts. But the golden light outside was still swimming around. It was obvious that it was still being controlled. With that in mind, Yu Qianqiu was slightly relieved. After the thunderclap resounded for nearly 2 hours, Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression became more and more shocked. He wondered if he could withstand such a powerful thunderbolt for 2 hours, with just his body alone, if his cultivation was still at its peak. Just as he was asking himself, the golden light mixed with the thunderbolts suddenly sped up. The atmosphere between heaven and earth became extremely heavy, so oppressive that it was difficult to breathe. It made people feel as if the air had stopped flowing. With the mountain peak as the center, it was as if even time had stopped flowing. Suddenly, the pressure between heaven and earth relaxed, and the thunderbolts under the dark clouds quickly disappeared. The rumbling sky returned to normal in the blink of an eye, with only the wind blowing. The feeling of the tremors suddenly disappearing, and only the sound of the wind made people feel relieved. It was as if they had drunk honey, and every pore in their body was breathing to their heart's content. The sky began to turn white, and the dark clouds in the sky quickly dissipated. No one knew where they came from, and where they would return to. Perhaps the person standing on the mountain peak would know the answer. After all, he was the one who had summoned them. The light ball on the mountain peak gradually shrank, slowly disappearing or converging into that person's body. Bai Changchun stood there unscathed, unhurriedly twisting the cloth buttons on his green robe. His clothes were obviously brand new. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. The old man was actually changing his clothes in the lightning? As Bai Changchun meticulously tidied up his clothes, the golden light solidified on the mountain peak, also drew an arc, and entered his body. After tidying up his clothes, he slowly put his hands behind his back, and a majestic aura was suddenly released from his body. It was like a stormy sea that rolled in all directions, and it pressed down on the surrounding trees at the foot of the mountain, causing them to collapse one after another. Yu Qianqiu was forced to breathe by the aura that rushed over. His eyes rolled back, and he felt the strong pressure pouring into his lungs, about to burst them. Fortunately, Immortal Lord Crocodile released a golden transparent shield of vigor and time, containing him within it. Only then did he have the leisure to look around while panting. The trees at the foot of the mountain fell like dominoes. The aura released by Bai Changchun soared into the sky, and the dark clouds in the sky that had not yet dissipated were immediately dispersed, and they quickly spread up and down. When Bai Changchun retracted his aura, the vegetation within a kilometer radius had fallen into a huge circle, as neat as the crop circles in his previous life. Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back, finally calmed down. He looked into the distance quietly, his green robe fluttering in the wind, and his expression calm. Immortal Lord Crocodile retracted the golden transparent shield of vigor, and flew to the mountain peak with Yu Qianqiu. Bai Changchun slowly turned to look at the two, his expression calm. Yu Qianqiu looked at him up and down for a while, and did not find anything different from before. He asked suspiciously, Master, have you succeeded in body forging? Bai Changchun nodded slightly, expressionless. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flickered, and he said in a low voice, If I'm not wrong, your cultivation has broken through again. Bai Changchun nodded again and said lightly, Early stage great immortal was the limit that my body could withstand before, and I have been suppressing my cultivation for many years. This time, with the help of the power of heaven and earth, I directly broke through to the late stage great immortal. This is also a matter of course, there is nothing strange about it. Yu Qianqiu's mouth opened, revealing an exaggerated expression of surprise. And then he cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Congratulations, master." But in his heart he was complaining. Such a powerful cultivation. But he did not take care of his disciple. It was really inhumane. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head in amazement and said, "I have lived for hundreds of thousands of years, but this is the first time I have seen someone who can withstand such a powerful cultivation with a human body. In the celestial realm, it is more difficult to cultivate one level, but you actually broke through 2 levels in one go. It is really admirable." Immortal Lord Crocodile is a knowledgeable person in the celestial realm. "I have something to ask," Bai Changchun said lightly. Although his tone and expression were a little indifferent, Immortal Lord Crocodile was not angry, because the person in front of him was indeed worthy of his admiration, and he had the right to be arrogant. So he nodded and said, "Brother Bai, please ask. I will tell you everything I know." Bai Changchun asked indifferently, "I've already succeeded in forging my body. I wonder if I can smoothly pass through the Netherworld Flame Sea in the Netherworld Passage with my current body?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. In a flash, he already knew what Bai Changchun was trying to do. He was so shocked that he was speechless. Immortal Monarch Crocodile smiled faintly and said, "Of course. The Netherworld Fire Sea can only stop those with mortal flesh and blood, but it cannot stop those who have cultivated the immortal body, demonic body, and nether body. Brother Bai can go whenever you want, but you have to leave the heaven and earth cosmos formation first. Oh, it's a slip of the tongue. Since your disciple can enter and exit this place at will, it shouldn't be a problem for Brother Bai." Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianqiu. Then he shook his head lightly and said, "When I was communicating with the heavens and the earth earlier, I've already faintly glimpsed the profundity of the worldly formation of heaven and earth. The worldly formation of heaven and earth can no longer stop me from entering and leaving." Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun again dumbfounded. He really admired Bai Changchun from the bottom of his heart. This old fellow's ability was indeed unfathomable. Even the worldly formation of heaven and earth couldn't stop him now. He was really a little too strong. He let out a long sigh in his heart. A trapped dragon rising to the heavens, about to soar to the 9 heavens. Bai Changchun's words were actually meant for Yu Qianqiu to hear. But Immortal Monarch Crocodile was a little confused and couldn't wrap his head around it. He paused and said, "From what Brother Bai said, are you going to leave the Eastern Holy Land and head to the Netherworld now?" Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said indifferently, "Not for now. I heard that the Eastern Holy Land is ruled by 2 immortal monarchs on land and 2 Netherworld generals on land. Since I'm here, there's no reason I won't know." Chapter 738. After a moment of silence, Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly, "Brother Bai's methods are unquestionable, but I still have to advise you not to trespass into the Netherworld. You must know that not everyone can ascend to the immortal world, but the majority of them end up in the underworld. In the boundless and endless darkness, perhaps there are some unknown existences that are even more terrifying than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor." Even Bai Changchun was a little moved after hearing this. He pondered and said, "Immortal Monarch means to say that there is someone in the underworld with a higher cultivation than the Underworld King and Immortal Emperor?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes sparkled as he listened carefully. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. "I'm not sure. No one knows where the end of the Netherworld is. On the surface, the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld are equally famous, but that's all on the surface. Those unknown beings that have been silent for countless years are the most terrifying existences in the 3 realms. Those endless places have always been covered by a mysterious veil of darkness. I once heard Immortal Emperor Jin Tai say that although the Netherworld is the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld, even Bai Qi himself did not dare to uncover the mysteries of those endless places. That's why Immortal Emperor Jin Tai has never set foot in the Netherworld for fear of attracting unnecessary trouble." Bai Changchun's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a strong fighting spirit in them. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but interrupt curiously. "More powerful than the Immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld?" Isn't that a god? Is there a god in that place? I don't know. I only heard Immortal Emperor Jin Tai mention it casually. He seemed to be afraid of it, so he didn't elaborate. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and looked at Bai Changchun. Brother Bai, if you must go to the netherworld, it's best not to set foot in that endless place. Consider this my advice. Yu Qianqiu secretly cursed. The more advice you give, the more excited the old man will be. He turned to look at Bai Changchun and saw that Bai Changchun and Immortal Lord Crocodile were looking into the distance. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but look as well. More than a dozen streams of light flew over and turned into a dozen people with different appearances. They stood in the air and stared at the three people on the mountain peak. One of them pointed at Bai Changchun and said to a golden-robed man with a sinister face, "It's him." Before he could finish speaking, his eyes were fixed on Immortal Lord Crocodile. His mouth was agape as if he had seen something unbelievable. Everyone else reacted the same way, their eyes filled with shock. The golden-robed leader's face stiffened. He looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile in shock. You are Immortal Lord Crocodile?" Immortal Crocodile stared at him and sneered. "Jin Miao, long time no see. What business do you have here? Could it be that you know that I have reappeared and are here to visit me? How is that possible?" The golden-robed man was shocked. Weren't you killed by the Myriad Swords demon monarch? How are you still alive? Do you wish for me to die?" Immortal Lord Crocodile narrowed his eyes. The aura of an immortal monarch that looked down on the entire world had appeared again. "I wouldn't dare." The golden-robed man was suddenly startled. He looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile suspiciously. "Immortal Lord, your cultivation level?" The dozen or so people looked at each other. At their level of cultivation, they could easily distinguish anyone's unique aura. It was difficult for others to disguise themselves. They were certain of Immortal Lord Crocodile's identity, but their cultivation level was unbelievable. Immortal Lord Crocodile, one of the 12 great immortal lords of the celestial world, should have been a mid-stage celestial emperor. However, even they could see through Immortal Lord Crocodile's cultivation level. It was unbelievable. "It's all thanks to the Myriad Swords demon monarch," Immortal Lord Crocodile said through gritted teeth. His words immediately gave everyone an idea of what was going on. They looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. The golden-robed man gave a look to his left and right, and the dozen or so people floated into the air and bowed. "Greetings, Immortal Lord Crocodile. Rise." Immortal Lord Crocodile showed the majestic aura of the past. He raised his hand and gestured for them to rise. Then he asked, "Jin Miao, what are you doing here? Recently, someone broke into the Great Lord's mansion and slaughtered our celestial world cultivators. I am here to capture this person on the orders of the immortal lords of the eastern and western palaces." After Jin Miao finished speaking, he glanced at Bai Changchun and looked at the person beside him with a hint of doubt. "Didn't you say that person was an early-stage great immortal?" The reason why he said this was because he could tell that Bai Changchun was in the advanced grand immortal stage with his early immortal emperor stage cultivation. This was completely different from the early grand immortal stage cultivation that he had received earlier. He was starting to suspect that he had recognized the wrong person. The person beside him also felt strange. At the scene of the incident, he could see that Bai Changchun's cultivation level was the same as his. Why couldn't he see through it now? He explained doubtfully, "I am sure that this person is the one who caused trouble. As for his cultivation level, perhaps he has some way to hide it. Otherwise, he would not have been able to kill the Great Lord and the others." Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun nervously, but Bai Changchun just stood there with his hands behind his back and his eyes slightly closed. Jin Miao was sizing Bai Changchun up when Immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly asked, "Jin Miao, what are you talking about? Who are the two palace immortal lords?" He was more concerned about this. He also wanted to know which immortal lords were still alive. Jin Miao was startled. Then he smiled and cupped his hands. "Immortal Lord, East Palace Immortal Lord Yi Shao and West Palace Immortal Lord Ji Wu." Yi Shao and Ji Wu. I didn't expect them to be alive. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. "Jin Miao, go back and report that I will go find them in a few days." I will definitely pass on your message. But, Jean Miao stared at Bai Changchun and sneered. Please wait for a moment. Allow me to capture this person first. Otherwise, I will not be able to report back empty-handed. Immortal Lord Crocodile waved his hand. You don't have to worry about this. When I see Yi Xiao and Ji Wu, I will explain to them. You go back first. Jean Miao's eyes flashed. Immortal Lord Crocodile, this is not appropriate. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flashed as he glared at Jean Miao and shouted. Jean Miao, how dare you speak to me like this? His aura surged, and he was indeed angry. That surging aura almost suffocated Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly, a righteous aura appeared in front of him, counteracting the pressure he had to bear. Bai Changchun had lent him a helping hand. Jean Miao raised his eyebrows. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and narrowed his eyes. Immortal Lord Crocodile, do you really think that with your current cultivation, you are qualified to be one of the 12 immortal lords? One must know one's own limits. Don't be shameless. I am polite to you, because the immortal emperor conferred you the title of immortal lord. Do you really think that you are a nobody now? You want to see 2 immortal lords? Believe it or not, even if I kill you now, no one will say a word. I will definitely take you away. You'd better know what's good for you. Don't make things difficult for yourself. The dozen people around him burst into laughter. They were laughing at Immortal Lord Crocodile for overestimating himself. How dare you? Immortal Lord Crocodile roared. His weakness was poked, and he immediately flew into a rage. He spread his arms and a majestic aura spread out. He was about to attack. However, someone beside him said lightly, Immortal Lord, step back for now. Bai Changchun stepped forward and stared at Jean Miao and the others. I hope you have the ability to take me away. Don't let me down. Everyone instantly felt an indescribable aura suddenly erupt from that thin body. The entire mountain peak gave off a majestic feeling, as if it had merged with the heavens and the earth. Suddenly, the green-robed body seemed so tall and big. Under that thin face, his lips moved slightly, and a sonorous Sanskrit chant resounded through the sky. There is righteousness in heaven and earth. A majestic pressure suddenly descended from the sky and gushed out from the ground, surging between heaven and earth. It could not be seen or touched, but it felt so clear and shocking. These immortals with high cultivation looked around in horror. The willfulness that they usually had when they soared between heaven and earth disappeared. At this time, in the face of the power of heaven and earth, they suddenly felt so small. Jean Miao's pupils shrank. She looked at Bai Changchun in disbelief and shouted, Kill him. Righteousness condense. As soon as she finished speaking, the majestic aura in the surroundings instantly condensed and pressed down like thousands of towering mountains. The huge pressure made the eyes of the dozen people who were extracting immortal treasures bulge. Among them, 2 of the weaker ones exploded into 2 clouds of blood mist on the spot. They finally understood that once the power of heaven and earth was unleashed, it was not something that could be resisted by humans. The rest of the people who were extracting immortal treasures had become slow motion. They were suffering from the huge pressure of resisting the power of heaven and earth. Bai Changchun stared at them indifferently, expressionless. Immortal Lord Crocodile and Yu Qianqiu stood beside Bai Changchun. Although they could feel the terrifying power of heaven and earth, they did not feel any pressure. But from the actions of the people floating in the air opposite them, they could see that this inexplicable power was indescribably strong, because 2 immortals could not resist it and died on the spot. Yu Qianqiu's mouth turned into a circle, and his eyes shone brightly. He did not know how to vent his feelings of admiration. In short, this old fellow was still as admirable as ever. Selling cakes. Immortal Lord Crocodile's lips were tightly shut, and the muscles on his cheeks were constantly rubbing as he stared at the thin figure in front of him in a green robe. At this moment, Bai Changchun stretched out his right hand from behind his back. He raised his palm and slowly lifted it up. Under the heavy pressure, a steady stream of air squeezed in from all directions and gathered in his palm. A dazzling light burst out, and the ball of light grew bigger and more dazzling. Suddenly, the withered palm moved, shuttling through the ball of light, changing into an unfathomable trajectory. Finger shadows intertwined, and countless sharp white lights burst out from the fingertips. In the blink of an eye, thousands of streams of light flew like a storm toward the dozen people floating in the air opposite them. The scene of cornucopia green eyebrows being struck down flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He said in a daze, "Immortal lost finger." Chapter 739. After a moment of silence, Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly, "Brother Bai's methods are unquestionable, but I still have to advise you not to trespass into the netherworld. You must know that not everyone can ascend to the immortal realm, but most of them end up in the netherworld. In the endless darkness, there may be some unknown beings more terrifying than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor." Even Bai Changchun was moved by this. "Immortal Lord, do you mean that there are people in the netherworld with higher cultivation than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up as he listened. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. "I'm not sure. No one knows where the end of the netherworld is. On the surface, the immortal realm and the netherworld are equally famous, but that's all on the surface. Those unknown beings that have been silent for countless years are the most terrifying existences in the three realms. Those endless places have always been covered by a mysterious veil of darkness. I once heard Immortal Emperor Jin Tai say that although the netherworld is the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld, even Bai Qi himself did not dare to uncover the mysteries of those endless places. That's why Immortal Emperor Jin Tai has never set foot in the netherworld for fear of attracting unnecessary trouble." Bai Changchun's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a strong fighting spirit in them. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but interrupt curiously. "More powerful than the Immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld? Isn't that a god? Is there a god in that place?" "I don't know. I only heard Immortal Emperor Jin Tai mention it casually. He seemed to be afraid of it, so he didn't elaborate." Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and looked at Bai Changchun. "Brother Bai, if you must go to the netherworld, it's best not to set foot in that endless place. Consider this my advice." Yu Qianqiu secretly cursed. The more advice you give, the more excited the old man will be. He turned to look at Bai Changchun and saw that Bai Changchun and Immortal Lord Crocodile were looking into the distance. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but look as well. More than a dozen streams of light flew over and turned into a dozen people with different appearances. They stood in the air and stared unkindly at the three people on the mountain peak. One of them pointed at Bai Changchun and said to the leading golden-robed man, "That's him." Before he could finish, he stared at Immortal Lord Crocodile with his mouth agape, as if he had seen something unbelievable. Everyone else was the same, their eyes filled with shock. The golden-robed leader's face stiffened. He looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile in shock. You are Immortal Lord Crocodile?" Immortal Crocodile stared at him and sneered. "Jin Miao, long time no see. What business do you have here?" The willfulness that they usually had when they soared between heaven and earth had suddenly disappeared. At this moment, in the face of the power of heaven and earth, they suddenly felt so small. Jin Miao's pupils shrank. She looked at Bai Changchun in disbelief and shouted, "Kill him! Righteousness condense!" As soon as she finished speaking, the majestic aura in the surroundings instantly condensed and pressed down like thousands of towering mountains. The huge pressure made the eyes of the dozen people who were extracting immortal treasures bulge. Among them, two of the weaker ones exploded into two clouds of blood mist on the spot. They finally understood that once the power of heaven and earth was unleashed, it was not something that could be resisted by humans. The rest of the people who were extracting immortal treasures had become slow motion. They were suffering from the huge pressure of resisting the power of heaven and earth. Bai Changchun stared at them indifferently, expressionless. Immortal Lord Crocodile and Yu Qianqiu stood beside Bai Changchun. Although they could feel the terrifying power of heaven and earth, they did not feel any pressure. But from the actions of the people floating in the air opposite them, they could see that this inexplicable power was indescribably strong, because two immortals could not resist it and died on the spot. Yu Qianqiu's mouth turned into a circle, and his eyes shone brightly. He did not know how to express his admiration for the old man. In short, he still worshipped the old man as always. Damn, Immortal Lord Crocodile's lips were tightly shut, and the muscles on his cheeks kept twitching. He stared at the back of the thin figure in front of him in a green robe. At this moment, Bai Changchun stretched out his right hand from behind his back. He raised his palm and slowly lifted it up. Under the heavy pressure, a steady stream of air squeezed in from all directions and gathered in his palm. A dazzling light burst out, and the ball of light grew bigger and more dazzling. Suddenly, the withered palm moved, shuttling through the ball of light, changing into an unfathomable trajectory. Finger shadows intertwined, and countless sharp white lights burst out from the fingertips. In the blink of an eye, thousands of streams of light flew toward the dozen people floating in the air opposite them like a storm. The scene of cornucopia green eyebrows being struck down flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He said in a daze, "Immortal lost finger." Little did he know that he was also stumped. From the fact that his attack had been neutralized, he could tell that it would be very difficult for him to break through the power of this umbrella with his current cultivation, unless he had the help of some treasure. As the saying goes, someone sends you a pillow when you're dozing off. Yu Qianqiu looked at the arrogant guy who was laughing wildly. He wanted to rush up and kick him, but he couldn't do anything with his own abilities. Just as he was angry, he suddenly froze. He foolishly took out the dark golden sword that had suppressed Immortal Lord Crocodile for more than 100,000 years. He looked at Bai Changchun, then at Immortal Lord Crocodile and said, "Can this thing break through his defense?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's gaze fell on the divine sword, and he suddenly clapped excitedly. He pointed at Jin Miao and laughed loudly. "Jin Miao, consider yourself unlucky to have encountered such a good thing. You're dead today." Bai Changchun couldn't help but open his eyes to look at the thing in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Jin Miao was slightly stunned. He stared suspiciously at the sword in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Suddenly his eyes widened and he said in shock, "Myriad Swords Demon Lord, this is one of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord swords. Why is it here?" His eyes were filled with disbelief. Any cultivator who was trapped in the heaven and earth universe formation would recognize this thing. Not only did they recognize it, but it was deeply engraved in their hearts. It could be said that he had been terrified by this thing in the past. It would be strange if they didn't recognize it. "It's useful." Yu Qianqiu shook the thing in his hand and asked suspiciously, "It can break his golden umbrella?" Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed loudly. "It's very useful. This is a divine artifact, and not an ordinary one at that. It's indestructible. I don't know how many celestial treasures have been turned into scrap metal in the past. Breaking his golden umbrella is like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Damn it, why didn't you say so earlier?" Yu Qianqiu pointed the sword in his hand at Jin Miao and said, "Be asterisk starred. Who asked you to be so arrogant? Watch how I kill you." He took a step forward and realized that it was difficult to move forward. The pressure in front of him was too great, and he couldn't overcome it at all. "Yu Qianqiu, make the sword bigger. Lend it to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed loudly. He rolled up his sleeves energetically and said, "How dare he look down on me? Let me deal with him personally." "No problem." Yu Qianqiu laughed sinisterly. Sometimes, he liked to help the wicked do bad things. Immortal Lord Crocodile cooperated with him and shouted, "Bigger, bigger." At the blink of an eye, a slightly deformed giant sword appeared. The hilt was still small, and in Yu Qianqiu's hand, the blade was more than 10 meters long. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and asked, "Is this enough?" Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded repeatedly and said, "Almost." As he said this, he grabbed the divine sword. When it landed in his hand, it felt heavy. It was simply too heavy, a full 108,000 kilograms. He had no choice. He couldn't control it, so he could only use brute force. Fortunately, with his cultivation level, he could still hold it. "Brother Bai, please loosen the path for me. Let me deal with that despicable person with my own hands." Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled at Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun looked at the two of them shouting, "Big, big, big." His expression was a little. He nodded slightly in agreement. Once the pressure in front of him lessened, Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately flew over with the giant sword. landing in front of the golden umbrella and laughing lewdly. Looking at the giant sword, Jin Miao was a little stunned. He immediately said in horror, "Immortal Lord, I was too presumptuous just now. We can talk things out. Wait. If you push me too far, I will self-destruct and die with you." A despicable person like you? You don't have the guts to self-destruct even if I ask you to. Are you willing to be destroyed forever? As Immortal Lord Crocodile spoke, the giant sword in his hand swept horizontally. With a whoosh, it directly cut through the golden light curtain that sprinkled down from the umbrella. As expected of a divine sword, its indestructible sharpness went without saying. It sliced through the golden light curtain like a knife cutting through tofu. The giant sword was too big, and there was almost no space for Jin Miao to dodge. Jin Miao, who was under the umbrella, exclaimed, "Immortal Lord, spare me!" Ah! There was a scream, and blood spurted out. The person under the umbrella was cut in half. The golden umbrella, which had lost its magic power to support it, was put away. A huge pressure surged, and immediately the two halves of the body exploded into two clouds of blood mist. At this moment, the huge pressure disappeared instantly, and the thick pressure also dissipated between heaven and earth. Everything returned to normal. Immortal Lord Crocodile grabbed the golden umbrella, wiped away the remaining divine sense inside, and threw it to Yu Qianqiu. "Take this. Your cultivation level is low, so I'll give you a good life-saving item." Yu Qianqiu caught the closed golden umbrella and winked at it. He turned around and hugged it, fondling it as if he was hugging a sexy and enchanting beauty. "What a shame. I've never seen this before. Put away your divine sword." Immortal Lord Crocodile returned the sword to Yu Qianqiu, who quickly shrunk it. He held the sword in one hand and the umbrella in the other. He looked at both sides and nodded with satisfaction. One was an indestructible divine sword, and the other was a golden umbrella with amazing defense. It was a perfect match. Good stuff. Bai Changchun frowned slightly and stood still, as if he had gained some enlightenment from the battle just now. Immortal Lord Crocodile walked over and sighed. "Brother Bai's methods have really opened my eyes. The power of heaven and earth comes and goes at your beck and call. I wonder what this technique is. Do you have a name for me to admire?" Bai Changchun glanced at him and said calmly, "Let's call it the morality technique. I've gained some enlightenment, but it needs to be perfected. There is morality in heaven and earth. Righteousness. Morality technique." Immortal Lord Crocodile took a deep breath and looked into the distance. He shook his head and clicked his tongue. "Not bad, it's a good name. Just the name alone was enough to make one ponder. There is morality in heaven and earth, and morality is everlasting and mighty. The power of heaven and earth. Don't underestimate it, don't underestimate it." Bai Changchun looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging the treasure and smiling. He said, "Immortal Lord Crocodile, I would like to ask you some questions." Immortal Lord Crocodile turned to face him. "I've lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and there aren't many people that I truly admire. You, Bai Changchun, are one of them. If you have any questions, ask away. I will tell you everything I know." "You flatter me," Bai Changchun said calmly. "The treasures used by human cultivators are relatively crude. I'm not knowledgeable, and today is the first time I've seen such a strong defensive immortal treasure like the golden umbrella. There must be many similar treasures in the netherworld and immortal world. Do you really need to use a treasure that can restrain it to break it? That's hard to say. Usually, other than using the corresponding treasure to break it, you can only rely on your strong cultivation. If that doesn't work, you can only escape and wait for a chance to sneak an attack." Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he immediately understood Bai Changchun's apprehension. Obviously, it was because of what happened just now. He walked over with the two treasures in his hands and offered them to Immortal Lord Crocodile. "Master, you should take these two treasures with you. With them, you should be able to solve a lot of problems." Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He nodded slightly. However, Bai Changchun shook his head. "These are not suitable for me. If I use them too often, I'll become dependent on them. You should use them sparingly. It's best not to use them unless you have no other choice." Using too many of them will only harm your cultivation. You're on your own. With that, he turned into a green stream of light and flew into the sky. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he held the two treasures. He didn't expect to be taught a lesson for his good intentions. But as he watched the green stream of light disappear in the sky, he felt suffocated. After this farewell, he didn't know when they would meet again, and he didn't know if they would have the chance to meet again. Chapter 741. Old Monster. Do you think my master is a match for that two-palace immortal lord? Yu Qianqiu asked, looking in the direction whereby Changchun had disappeared. Based on his current cultivation level, to be honest, it will be difficult. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked up at the sky and said, Actually, you don't have to worry. Since the Heaven and Earth Qianquan array can't trap your master, he should have no problem escaping. At least Yi Xiao and Ji Wu won't be able to chase him out of the array. Forget it, the old man asked for it. Yu Qianqiu muttered. He put away the two treasures in his hands and quickly flew down the mountain. He scuttled into the collapsed forest and searched around. Immortal Lord Crocodile was curious about what he was looking for. When he found a bracelet in the grass, he realized that this guy was looking for the storage bracelets that those people had lost. Not long after, Yu Qianqiu flew back to the top of the mountain with a dozen bracelets in his hands. He used his divine sense to check them one by one. After looking through them, Yu Qianqiu's expression did not look too good. There was nothing in them, other than some that he did not recognize. There were pitifully few spirit stones left. They were not even as many as the spirit stones in the bracelet of the Immortal World's envoy on the Immortal Ascension platform. Logically speaking, this was impossible. The envoy's level was obviously lower than these people. Old Monster, I don't know if I'm blind, but can you help me see if there is anything valuable in these bracelets? Yu Qianqiu stuffed the bracelets into his hands. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned, but he still checked the contents of the dozen or so bracelets, and found that there were indeed very few items. Apart from a few decent immortal artifacts, there was really nothing valuable. He thought for a while, and understood what was going on. He returned the bracelets to Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, Of course there is nothing valuable, but the quality of the immortal artifacts inside is not bad. If it was in the immortal world, it would be worth some money. But in the human world, it might not be worth the price it should be. Yu Qianqiu put away the bracelet. He had no intention of selling the immortal equipment in the cultivation world. If these immortal equipment were to be sold to the cultivation world, it would simply be looking for trouble for himself. Frowning, he said, You said that it's inevitable that there's nothing valuable. Why do you say that? The consumption of spirit stones by immortals is far greater than that of mortal cultivators. After being sealed here by the Heaven and Earth Cosmos formation for more than 100,000 years, they must have used up almost all the things that could be consumed. Even if there are spirit stone mines on this continent, I reckon that there will be too many people and not enough meat. Everyone will not be able to eat their fill, Immortal Lord Crocodile said with a smile. I see. Yu Qianqiu sighed and shook his head. I wanted to make a fortune from them, but I was happy for nothing. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked casually, Why? Are you short of spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu would never tell others that he was rich. Instead, he liked to complain about being poor. He replied subconsciously, I'm poor. I'm poor. Immortal Lord Crocodile paused for a moment, and then said solemnly, I still have some spirit stones with me. If you really need them, I can give you some. Yu Qianqiu, who had asked casually, was stunned. His eyes lit up as he said, You have it? How many do you have? Immortal Lord Crocodile checked his storage bracelet and said nonchalantly, Not much, just about 400 million divine-grade spirit stones in total. How much? Yu Qianqiu quickly dug his ears, thinking that he had misheard. He asked expectantly, You said that you have 400 million divine-grade spirit stones? Did you say it wrong, or did I hear it wrong? Are you sure it's 400 million divine-grade spirit stones, not 400 million high-grade spirit stones? Nonsense. My cultivation hasn't fallen to the point where I can't even see clearly. Of course it's 400 million divine great spirit stones. Immortal Lord Crocodile said firmly. Yu Qianqiu shuddered at these words, and he walked towards Immortal Lord Crocodile with trembling hands. The expression on his face was as detestable as it could be. Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at him and said solemnly, Brat, what's wrong with you? Yu Qianqiu hugged Immortal Lord Crocodile's waist, burying his head in Immortal Lord Crocodile's arms as he wailed, Old monster, from today onwards, you're my master. You're 2F** King Rich. Scram! Immortal Lord Crocodile bellowed. He had never been hugged like this by a man for so long, and goosebumps rose all over his body. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't let go no matter what? He shook his head and said, You're too rich, you're not human. You're a god in my heart. You're my god of wealth. Hugging you is the same feeling as hugging money. Immortal Lord Crocodile was taken aback. This guy was excited because of money. He said solemnly, If you want spirit stones, just say it. Don't be so disgusting. Say it. How much do you want? Yu Qianqiu loosened his grip, revealing a pitiful expression as he weakly stretched out a finger. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face darkened. You really dare to ask? With your current cultivation, do you think you need so many spirit stones? After saying that, he reached out and pulled the storage pouch from Yu Qianqiu's waist. He casually glanced at it and was immediately taken aback. He looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously, wondering why this fellow had an empty storage pouch on him. Or did he put those things just now? He didn't think too much about it, and directly took out a pile of shiny black spirit stones from his bracelet, and put them into the storage bag. Then, he threw the storage bag back to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's hands trembled as he picked up the storage bag and examined it. It would have been fine if he hadn't taken a look, but when he did he was shocked. There was a huge pile of shiny black spirit stones in the storage bag. There were actually 100 million divine grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianqiu thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He shook his head and looked at the storage bag again. But the truth was the truth. No matter how he looked at it, there were 100 million divine grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened, and he staggered several steps back as if he was struck by lightning. He couldn't believe it. He had wanted to ask Immortal Lord Crocodile for 1 million divine grade spirit stones, but the other party misunderstood and gave him 100 million, 100 times more than what he wanted. Oh my God! A divine grade spirit stone was worth 100 million high-grade spirit stones. How many high-grade spirit stones was 100 million divine grade spirit stones worth? Damn it, I can't calculate it. In any case, I'm rich. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Huang Xiaolong's behavior and scolded. What the hell are you doing? Yu Qianqiu regained his senses and hurriedly stuffed the storage bag into his robe, sending it back to Utopia. He was afraid that the old man would go back on his word. In any case, now that the storage bag was in his hands, he wouldn't return it even if he was beaten to death. With an astronomical amount of wealth in his hands, Yu Qianqiu felt comfortable all over. He no longer had to worry about being unable to support a woman. Patting his chest, Huang Xiaolong felt more confident. He cleared his throat and looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, asking curiously, How did you get so many divine grade spirit stones? Were you in charge of the Immortal Emperor's finances? What nonsense are you talking about? How can a mere 400 million divine grade spirit stones be considered a lot? If it was in the past, Jin Miao would have been able to take it out. There were many people in the immortal world who could take out 400 million divine grade spirit stones. These are just the ones I carry around with me. I think it wouldn't be a problem to take out 10 billion divine grade spirit stones from my immortal palace. Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression dimmed as he sighed. If I had known this would happen, I would have brought more with me. Now, I'm afraid they've all become someone else's wedding dress. Yu Qianqiu finally understood. If Immortal Lord Crocodile hadn't been suppressed at the bottom of the lake for so many years without anyone knowing, the spirit stones in his bracelet wouldn't have been left behind until now. However, he was still shocked by the wealth of the celestial world. People at different levels had a different understanding of wealth. Immortal Lord Crocodile's wealth alone was enough to rival the entire cultivation world. The immortal world is indeed the immortal world. There are so many spirit stones. You're wrong. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head. In fact, the place with the most spirit stones isn't the immortal world, but the netherworld. Whether it's the vastness of the land, or the reserves of spirit stones, the netherworld has the most spirit stones. To the netherworld cultivators, spirit stones are useless to their cultivation, so very few people mine them. At the same time, the netherworld emperor strictly controls the mining of spirit stones. His main purpose is to prevent large amounts of spirit stones from falling into the hands of the immortal world cultivators, to strengthen the immortal world. Of course, there are times when the netherworld uses spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. Secondly, the various feudal vassals in the netherworld secretly mine spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. This is also the main channel through which spirit stones from the netherworld flow to the immortal world. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The netherworld, which originally gave people a sense of horror, now made him yearn for it. He really didn't mind having more money. Instead, he felt that the more money the better, because he firmly believed that money made things easier. However, it was just wishful thinking. With his current ability, going to the netherworld was not a good thing. After coming to his senses, Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, I heard you and Jin Miao say that you want to visit Yi Xiao and Ji Wu. Are you really going to look for them? Immortal Lord Crocodile fell silent. After a long time he sighed. People are like this. Even Jin Miao doesn't take me seriously. Imagine what Yi Xiao and Ji Wu will do. Maybe Ji Wu's attitude will be better. And Yi Xiao has always been arrogant and condescending. Why should I go and humiliate myself? Sigh. Strength decides everything. You're finally willing to wake up from your dream. Yu Qianqiu despised him in his heart. Then he comforted him. Old monster, don't be discouraged. An old steed has great ambitions. Life will inevitably encounter ups and downs. Whether you're a hero or a coward, the key is to see who has the last laugh. So what if it's Ji Wu? So what if it's Yi Xiao? So what if he's the immortal emperor and the emperor of the netherworld? Don't you still have a lot of time to take things slowly? Now that everyone thinks that you're dead, the immortal emperor won't pay attention to you anymore. Without any hindrances, it's time for you to show your true abilities. If you don't believe me, you can wait another 1,000 years. Anything is possible. Of course, we have to start from scratch step by step. Otherwise, everything is just empty talk. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes lit up at these words, and his ambition was ignited once again. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, Then how do you think we should start from scratch? It's very simple. We'll benefit each other. In short, we'll help each other. Yu Qianqiu coughed and said in a weaker tone, First of all, help me find the purple flame first. Once I cultivate the Samadhi true fire, I'll burn whoever dares to stop us. Chapter 742. Humph. That's a good idea. Immortal Lord Crocodile said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu was no fool. He naturally heard the sarcasm in Immortal Lord Crocodile's tone. But he was happy to play dumb and pretend that he did not understand. As the saying went, if one was not thick-skinned, one should not come out. Boss Yu was experienced and knowledgeable, so this bit of provocation was nothing to him. Immortal Lord Crocodile also saw that this guy was thick-skinned and did not want to talk nonsense. He looked around and frowned. Jin Miao and the others died here. It won't be long before Yi Xiao and the others find out. I'm afraid we can no longer stay here and have to find another place. Don't worry. It's very safe here. When Yu Qianqiu said this, he looked into the distance with a hint of worry in his eyes. He was not saying this without reason, because the culprit, Bai Changchun, had gone in the opposite direction. If he met guests from the immortal city on the way, with Bai Changchun's personality, it was inevitable that he would fight. The culprit had already shown himself. Those immortals could not be expected to collect the corpses of Jin Miao and the others. Immortal Lord Crocodile was slightly startled, but he also understood from the worry in his eyes. The two did not say anything more. They flew down the mountain, turned a corner, and appeared in the forest on the other side. When the two walked to the Moon Lake, there were no more cannibals by the lake, and the tents at the foot of the mountain had been cleaned up. While Yu Qianqiu was puzzled, he saw many heads peeking out of the caves on the mountain. They were all frightened by the movement outside, and all hid in the caves. Knowing that the two warriors had returned, Garland was the first to run out of the cave, heading straight for Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was truly speechless towards this passionate woman. He allowed her to directly enter his bad side, and his face was also bitten a few times by her. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at this scene coldly and said, "I was wondering why you kept staying here. Turns out you're having an affair with this woman." Yu Qianqiu immediately took the time to reply, "Then you've wronged me. This is their custom. The women of the tribe like warriors the most. If you have the ability, then put that stinking face of yours away. I guarantee that there will be unexpected consequences." Seeing that the people outside were safe, the clansmen in the cave came out one after another. Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at the crowd and found that many women were staring at him. He was speechless. He believed Yu Qianqiu's words. "What happened over there?" Garland asked as he hung around Yu Qianqiu. "I don't know either." Yu Qianqiu denied it immediately. He then pushed Garland's muscular body away and said solemnly, "Clan leader Garland, can I proceed with my test now?" Garland's expression froze, and he immediately remembered what the test was. He waved his hand and said, "You are the strongest warriors here, so you don't need to be tested. You can stay here as long as you like." What a joke. A single person had killed a moonlight crocodile that the entire clan couldn't deal with. Why would he need to take the postgraduate entrance exam? Yu Qianqiu didn't care. He didn't want to trouble himself. He smiled and said, "Clan leader Garland, we are indebted to your clan for taking us in. We don't know how to thank you. Therefore, we have decided to participate in the fence meeting on behalf of your clan." The news that the new torture master of the demon region was Niu Yud had spread throughout the entire cultivation world. In particular, the news that Niu Yud had intimidated more than 100 soul formation cultivators and forced each lord to hand over 200 million superior-grade spirit stones shook the entire cultivation world. This disappearance was too shocking. Normally, the person who was humiliated would not expose his own shortcomings. No one knew who had spread this news. In an instant, Niu Yud's prestige in the cultivation world increased greatly. Bai Changchun, who had already left the cultivation world, was gradually forgotten. At least, the haze that shrouded the entire cultivation world had completely disappeared. As for the title of the #1 expert in the cultivation world, it was undoubtedly pushed to Niu Yud by everyone. Most people didn't expect that Niu Yud would actually take over Bai Changchun's position. It seemed that Niu Yud was an immortal from the celestial realm. This made the cultivators in the world sigh. Bai Changchun had left, and now Niu Yud had come. The demon region was still mysterious and powerful. It was the same for generations, and it was still inviolable. At this time, the forces of the various countries finally began to attack the Chinese cultivation world. After the Chinese cultivation world knew that the soul formation cultivators of the various countries didn't dare to trespass after being warned by Niu Yud, they were relieved and united to fight the forces of the various countries. This time, the various sects of China had to fight with their lives on the line. The other party was serious and wanted to snatch his territory. Once they lost, it would be a matter of life and death. Therefore, the old guys who had been cultivating in seclusion came out one after another. In an instant, the Chinese cultivation world erupted with shocking combat power, and the battle situation was extremely tragic. In general, the Chinese cultivation world was still weak, but the gap was not big. After all, the various sects of China still had a strong foundation, except for the lack of soul formation cultivators. The reason why the Chinese cultivation world was able to resist the joint forces of the various countries was because the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce, which was the most powerful and had the most disciples, didn't participate in this battle. Otherwise, the World Commerce Chamber would definitely be a powerful force that could change the balance. Among the various countries, the Dirong Kingdom and the Baiwan Kingdom didn't participate in this battle either. which greatly reduced the pressure on the Huaxia Empire. Facing such a stalemate was really out of the expectations of the various countries, and it was somewhat embarrassing. More than 300 countries had joined forces, but they still couldn't deal with the Chinese cultivation world. After the various countries discussed, the various lords had no choice but to bring out 80% to 90% of their strength for the sake of their own reputation. With this, the various countries finally invaded the Chinese cultivation world, and the forces of both sides started a life-and-death battle within the Chinese territory. At this critical moment, the supporting Immortal Island could be said to have erupted. Not to mention the various countries, even the Chinese cultivation world was shocked. Originally, the supporting Immortal Island had used more than 30 tribulation-passing realm experts, and everyone thought that was the limit of the supporting Immortal Island. Who knew that at this critical moment, the supporting Immortal Island would suddenly send more than 50 tribulation-passing realm experts to participate in the battle. These people were all people that the various sects thought were long dead, but unexpectedly, they were all alive and well. They were all hidden by the supporting Immortal Island and had broken through to the tribulation-passing realm. In total, the supporting Immortal Island had invested more than 90 tribulation-passing realm experts, and the other tribulation-passing realm disciples were mobilized by the hundreds and thousands. Tens of thousands of disciples of the cultivation pavilion, regardless of their cultivation level, as long as they were at the foundation establishment realm, they would all be bathed in blood. Based on this calculation, without the soul formation experts, the supporting Immortal Island could almost match the strength of the World Commerce Chamber. This kind of strength was really shocking, and people couldn't help but sigh. The so-called #1 sect in the world wasn't an undeserved reputation. It was indeed valiant. With this kind of strength, even in the entire cultivation world, the supporting Immortal Island was completely worthy of the title of #1 sect in the world. With this kind of strength, the 10,000 demons wouldn't be outdone by the supporting Immortal Island's move. The supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons accounted for half of them. There were many other cultivators, probably more than 200,000 in total. In fact, in terms of strength, the various countries' forces were not weaker than the Chinese cultivation world. This was because they had more experts, which was an important factor in determining the outcome of the battle. However, the various countries' forces were indeed not united, just as Pei Fong had scolded. It was fine when they first attacked, but once they entered the Chinese territory, they followed the orders of their superiors and focused on searching for the star bead. They were simply worried that it would fall into the hands of others, so they wanted to strike first to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, in order to protect their homeland, the Chinese cultivation world worked together to form a united rope. It should be known that the power of unity was terrifying. Therefore, the various countries' forces gave the Chinese cultivation world a chance to divide and annihilate them. They gradually nibbled away at them until the final battle, when the balance of power changed. In the end, the Chinese cultivation world won. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.